Okay, we're doing another little music project today. I thought what I would do is just really share with you my early experiments with Cubasis. This is my first real project, and there is a story behind it. I won't go into that in too much detail, but it's based on a MIDI track of a Motorhead song, Overkill. There's some logic behind that which may emerge as we go. I was looking for MIDI files, and I found this one. It wasn't what I was looking for, but anyway, it's the basis of the song. And this is, in some senses a tutorial, but it's really aimed at beginners. This is just I'm getting to grips with the iOS music apps and creating things on the iPad. One of the things I like about this is it's a little bit like the kind of modular synth model, if you like. You can buy lots of these apps, that many of which do overlapping things and similar things. Part of the work is figuring out which apps can do what, how to plug them together to get the effects that you want. So that's what you'd be looking at today. And, I am a beginner at this, and so I'll be quite happy to take advice on things I'm doing wrong or things where there's better ways of going about what I'm trying to do. So, in fact, one thing I'm just going to say at the start is I'm recording this using AUM. Recording the sound consistently for this is absolute nightmarish. I should say this is the second attempt at this project. I spent an hour and a half yesterday only to discover that what I was hearing through the headphone output wasn't what I was recording, so it was completely useless. I'm starting again. What I think I would really like is something I can plug into the headphone output of the iPad, so I know that I'm getting exactly what I hear, but also that I could plug my USB microphone into rather than plugging it into the iPad, and with a facility to mix, so I could bring the mic up or down, or the iPad output up or down, which is kind of what I'm doing on the screen here. I'm just tinkering with the microphone there, but I want a little hardware box that can do that. And the other advantage to that is I could plug in my MIDI keyboard to the Lightning port whilst I'm doing that recording. So if anybody can give me advice on how to go about that, that'd be great. But that said, let's get straight into this. We're going to go into Cubasis. Cubasis is the digital audio workstation, DAW, DAW, that I chose. And typically for me, I bought this the day before the Black Friday sale started, so I paid full price for this, £48. And it was a choice between this and Aurea Pro. Those are the two front runners when it comes to DAWs on the iPad. And I think from what I read, Aurea Pro is recognised as the more sophisticated and flexible of the two. But that said, Cubasis was said to be easier to pick up, so that was important to me. So I went for that, and so far it's pretty good. So we're going to start off with a new blank project. If we go to create new project, and let's just call it, for reasons which may become obvious, Captain Lockheed. What we're going to do is I haven't created this song from scratch. I've created it based around, as I said earlier, a MIDI file. So we're going to flip over to Audio Share, which is where I have the MIDI file saved. It's called overkill.mid. We can preview this on Audio Share. It's a bit of a rubbish preview. So we're not going to let the whole thing run. Okay, now you may be tempted to just throw that away and not bother based on that preview, but don't worry about that. So we're going to select the file. We're going to go over to the right hand side here. We're going to choose Share. We should find Share straight to Cubasis, so it'll copy it to Cubasis. If I go into the media bay and select MIDI, we've now got a file called Overkill. If I double click, it's going to bring that in, and the first thing that we find very welcome is that it's a multi-track MIDI file, and it brings in all the tracks as separate MIDI tracks. So if we just have a look at that, in fact what we'll do first of all, we'll just play it through. It's installed default instruments for these MIDI tracks, so let's just play that through. It's a little effect at the start. That's very slow, so hang on, oops, I'm recording there by mistake. Let's just undo that. Don't know what I recorded. That was very slow. The tempo is set to 60 beats per minute, so we'll just change that up to 120. Oh, come on. Thank you. That should be easier. Let's run that again. So that's a passable rhythm track. And the bass is coming now. That's bass-ish. Then the lead. That's supposed to be guitar, doesn't sound good. Okay, well, first thing we're going to do is, do you know what? The first thing we're going to do is, one criticism I've heard of Cubasis is it doesn't make any concessions to the iPad Pros. I'm on a 12.9 screen iPad Pro here. Everything's still a little bit chunky. And you can see my screen's filled up with these tracks. You can, if I pinch on the headers of these tracks, I can pinch them smaller. You do lose some of the information in the header there. It would be nice if you could collapse individual tracks down to a small strip, if you like. You can't do that. I'm just thinking of, I use Premiere Elements for editing my videos. You can do that in Elements for the audio and video tracks. But anyway, I'm just going to get rid of these last two tracks. These are just that effect that's at the start of the MIDI file. We don't need those, so delete that, delete that. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to delete, there's two lead tracks, which if I just, I don't know if you're familiar with this song, but these are actually, if I mute everything except those two leads, this is basically the tune. Vocal track, replacing the vocal track. Sounds rubbish because it's just putting some ropey synth effects there, but we're not going to need that because we're going to actually replace the vocal track with an actual vocal track. So I'm going to delete those two tracks as well. So now we're left with slightly more workable. We've got 4 tracks to play with. We're going to work on the rhythm track first. So just, that's okay, but it's not great. I'm going to go to the studio, go to the built-in microsonic instruments, and I'm going to change that out for one of the rock kits. Is good. That's pretty good. Go with this one, it's just called Rock Kit. So that sounds pretty good already. Next, the bass. Now the bass, we've got a set of bass sounds built in. I'm not going to use I'm basically going to replace the bass and the lead with a synth track. So we're going to start with the bass. Oops, get off there. And we're going to go to the instruments, and I'm going to use Cauldron from Yonak and I can use this as an audio unit. So the benefit of that is I can use more than one. I can use many instances of that as I want, and I'm going to use that for the lead guitar as well, and maybe a couple of other things. The preset, all this is going to be done on presets. I haven't yet got really heavily into making my own patches for any of these synths. We will get around to that eventually, but for now we're looking at presets, just getting to grips with the modularity of this whole creation business. I'm going to use a preset called, what's it called, Hedge Taper. Some weird names, these things. In fact, I'll just let you listen to that. Bring up the keys. It's kind of a bassy sound. It's got a nice fast attack and release, so it can be sequenced fairly well. But if we just play that through and listen to what it sounds like as a bass. Sounds pretty good already. That ain't too bad. It's a bit low. I think we'll transpose that. We'll go up an octave and see how that sounds. That's better. Yeah, I like that. So we'll keep that. Now then, the lead track. This is that sounds like a very synthetic guitar track. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to use Yonak's Cauldron for that as well. I think we're actually going to use the same. So I'm selecting audio unit again, Cauldron. So this is a second instance. So it can be a completely different preset. It's actually not going to be. I'm going to use the same preset. And oh, that sounds good. That's a bit low. So I'll transpose that up a bit as well. Let's just go along. Before I do that, there's a section where there's a solo. I didn't mean to do that. I've just moved that track out of the way. There's the solo there. Let's just listen to that. Yeah, that's too low. So we're going to up that by an octave as well. Let's try that. That's more like a guitar range. And then the solo, that's about right. Solo doesn't sound great. So we're going to finesse that later as well. But for now we've got a basic, what's that one? Oh yeah, we've got some, round the solo we've got another guitar track which is supposed to be a kind of grunge. Let's just listen to that. Again, I'm just not even going to listen to that, that's rubbish, so we're not going to use that. We're going to use, is that going to be Cauldron? I can't remember now. Yeah, we're going to use Cauldron again, a third instance. These AUMs are fantastic. If you use an in-trap audio, you can only use one instance of the synth, so we'd have to use 3 different synths or instruments. What's going on here? So, audio units, Yonak, Cauldron. We're going to go for a different preset, and it's called Taters. Don't know why it's called Taters, but it is. So that's a little bit of a different. It's kind of a bit of a rough, grungy sound down at the bottom end there. So if we just listen to that. That needs to go down, so we're going to transpose that down an octave. Yeah, listen to that. Dirty. Everything's coming in very loud. Is that dirty enough? Can we go down another octave? Let's try that. No, that's not good. Let's undo that. Alright, that's not too bad. Let's play the whole... Let's just play that whole solo thing. Oh, that's already sounding good. Okay, so that's not too bad. In fact, that's pretty good. We'll do a bit more with that solo when we get to it, but for now we're going to look at the, I suppose, the core of this song, which is the song, the vocal track. Now that's going to cause us a few problems because we don't have a singer. I can't sing, trust me. But we're going to be okay with that, because we're going to have some help, and we're going to use a vocoder application called VoxSyn. So we get a couple of options for the vocal track here. Now, just to say a little bit about this project, if you're watching this, you've probably heard the song already. You may or may not have understood what it's about. It's basically a commentary on the Captain Lockheed and the Starfighters album by Robert Calvert. And, the whole album, in my estimation, was undermined by a single word. This is an aviation-themed album. And at one point, Calvert uses the word aileron instead of aileron. And to me, that just undermines the credibility of the whole album. But there you go. That's the basis for the song. And so I wrote a song. Okay, there's two ways I could have performed this, and I experimented with both. One is to sing it, which was a little bit dodgy, and I think we've rescued that, and that's in the final track. I did also try doing this, by speaking the words in the manner of reciting a poem. Now that makes some kind of sense in the context. That's a lot of Calvert's work was done that way. If you listen to the Captain Lockheed album, in fact the offending song or track on that album was the Song of the Gremlin Part 2, and that was a spoken track. But if you're also familiar with Hawkwind's Space Ritual album, lots of the tracks on there were done with Calvert essentially reciting his poetry over music tracks. But in each of those cases, I've enlisted the help of this vocoding application called VoxSyn. So that's what we're going to look at now. And this is what VoxSyn looks like. We've got this slightly annoying overlay for AUM there. I'm not sure how to get rid of that, but we'll go with that. Now you can see this is a weird sort of keyboard with these hexagons. We're not going to do too much with that today, but you can see it's actually responding to my voice. There's an option to follow voice pitch. If I turn that off, it stops doing that. There's an option to follow MIDI pitch. I'm not connected to the MIDI keyboard because the lightning connector's in use with the microphone. I'll turn that off for now. But if I turn on follow voice pitch, and in its basic form, what this thing does is it's actually tracking my voice and applying a filter to it. Now you can't hear that because I've got it wound down in the mixer. But if I bring that up and speak, you should hear that effect. That's the default effect. It's called Fifth Original. I don't know what that means. If I just try a few of these. This is a choir preset. Some sort of robot voice, Squarian, just sort of random. There's hundreds of presets in it. You can find something that's going to be usable. Monotone, that's not even, you can see that's not following that. Or is it following the pitch of my voice? So we can use that to great effect. And if I just skip forward, I did a lot of experimenting with this to find suitable presets, and the one I've identified as the one I'm actually going to use to transform my voice it's the second one we looked at, choir. If I go back again to AUM and bring that back up. So you can hear this adds a lot to my voice. It does a lot of things. It kind of gives it a phasing effect. It widens the stereo field out. There's some sort of pan effect going on there. There's sort of airy, breathy sound. And so when I sing, that's going to cover up a multitude of sins. Now, one of the things I want to just look at in a little bit of detail here is we've got a thing called auto-tune on. If I wind that all the way down to 0, if I just try and do a bit of a sort of scale, if I start and just go up with my voice, that doesn't sound too bad. I don't have a lot of control over that. If I turn on this auto-tune, which by default is 100%, and if I do that thing again, you should hear it jumping from semitone to semitone. We've got a chromatic scale selected. You ought to be able to hear that quantization. Now the value of that is that obviously if you can't hold a tune, it snaps you to. It's like quantizing your MIDI track in a sense. Well, I mean exactly, and it's very helpful to somebody like me who can't sing for toffee. But the problem is it's a little bit too artificial sounding. If you have almost no control of your pitch, you tend to get a very warbly effect. And so what I've done is I've wound that down to, I think I recorded at about 12 or 13%. And that, it allows a little bit of wandering in the pitch. But if it gets too much, it snaps it to the next semitone. Now you can use, I'll just put that back to 100. If you use a different scale, you should hear that it's snapping to the scale. I don't know anything about these scales. Let me take diatonic major. Okay, sounded vaguely musical. Pentatonic, no, let's go for blues minor. There you go. So that's the main effect that I'm going to use to transform my singing voice. And if I just show you a little bit more about this app, we've got... we can play with the effects as well. We can edit things like we can mix in the original voice. So that's 80% the original track. Or, I'm going to do it live now, but and 20% of the effect. 100% of the live voice. We've still got the effects there. So if I go to effects, we've got a chorus and a reverb effect. If I take both of those out, we're just getting the dry input. If I put the reverb on, we get a bit of echo, a bit of chorus. It thickens it up a bit. What else? We've got all sorts of other effects we can add in there. We can't see those because that thing's in the way. Phaser, what is that? I'm not even sure what that is. Equalizer, so we can go in and cut the low frequencies or the high frequencies in and out. Anyway, we're not going to do that. So that's the main patch I'm going to use to transform my voice. But I've done another couple of experiments, and there's so many of these effects that you can play with them and find all sorts of you can have all sorts of ideas about how to use them. If I go into the pads and look at number 72, I think it's 72, is it pads? Dark Echo. So here's another. Now this one, you can't even make out the words of what I'm saying, but you get this really nice sort of panning and echoing effect. And so I'm going to use that effect to kind of underlay the main vocal track at strategic points, just to add in a bit of an effect. And of course you can go mad with this. Originally I had, I think, 4 different effects tracks and to mix in and out, but it really just gets muddy. And when you get more than 2, or or unless you're very selective and sparing in the use of those effects tracks, it's not worth the trouble. So before I move on, I'm just going to try and show you another alternative that I could have used for, if we go back to the original lead patch, I'm going to use this choir patch. Now it's doing the follow voice pitch, which is what we're going to use, but an alternative is, as I said earlier, I was going to use this, or I was thinking about using the spoken word approach. Now that in itself, I've got 2 options. I could have done that in the manner of Calvert's own work and just done that as a recitation. It would help if I had a nicer, posher speaking voice, but there you go. But the other thing I could have done is I could have done that recitation and then used this follow MIDI pitch option. If I turn that on now, let's leave them both on. So it's following my voice pitch, but if I press a key while I'm speaking, it locks to that C tone on the scale. Or if I got some tea, and I can go up the scales and talk in my business following me. So I'm just talking in monotone, but it's going up like that. Viking surfers, test tube robots, anarchy and noise. So I'm just speaking in a monotone there. Viking surfers, test tube robots, anarchy and noise. So there we go. We're modulating according to the MIDI pitch. That's just a little sidetrack. I didn't persist with that. I may try that in another experiment later. I think the best way to do that would be to have the MIDI keyboard, which is down here, I think out of sight, plugged in and be able to play that as you're speaking the words. So now there's a number of ways you can record that. I was speaking live there obviously, but you need to record that, and indeed I'm recording it to AUM at the moment. It's going into the storage space of audio share. You know, that's fine. If you then take those files, dump them on the timeline of Cubasis, they're ready-made audio tracks. The other thing you can do is you can go into Cubasis. I mean, if you look at my AUM setup here, I've basically got the microphone at the top of the screen. The effect bay has got VoxSyn plugged in, and it's going to the phones at the bottom, which is where I'm recording that output in AUM. Similarly, inside Cubasis, you can have the unadulterated audio track with the VoxSyn loaded as an effect, and then you can vary the effect. You know, you're not tied down to the final effect until you do the mix down. The way I did it was I just rendered a bunch of audio tracks with the VoxSyn effects applied, and then loaded those into Cubasis. So I think we'll go and look at that next. Okay, we're back in Cubasis and the project as we left it. The difference is now we're going to load in those vocal tracks. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cheat a bit and skip across to the real project, because what I've actually done is I've loaded those vocal tracks in and then chopped them up. So the only difference is that, really. I mean, let's just show, before I do that, if I wanted to add that, if I go, let's see, we've to go to audio share, go into my AUM recordings, Calvert session 2. Let's pretend we're going to import that track. We go to, how do we do this? We can go to, oh, not paste, sorry, cancel that. Copy to audio copy 3. Flip over to Cubasis, go into media, audio, import, audio paste, from pasteboard. I think that's going to be it. Well, let's, instead of previewing that, let's just double click. Goes in there. There it is. If I just solo that track.
Songs of Hawkwind.
Yeah, that's it. So there, and then we could do all the things I've said. We could apply the, I'm not actually going to do this because I might screw up the recording, but if I go through the motions and go insert effect, add effects, interapp audio, I could choose VoxSyn there. I'm not going to do that. As I say, I'm going to switch over to the final project, which is called Overkill. Okay, so here we are in the actual project. Again, it's now kind of busy. I'll get to that in a while, but we've got basically the same things. We've got the drum kit at the top. I should say that this, it's a little bit longer. This original MIDI file kind of fizzles out towards the end, and I've got a third verse in my song, so I had to cut some from the start and just add it on the end. So I've done that with the the drum kit, the bass, the lead guitar, and but everything's as it was in our original project. We've got the drum track, the bass track, and the lead guitar track. They should all sound the same. If I just start it, that's the bass, then the lead comes in. And you can see then down here I've added, let's just, what have we got? Main vocal. So we've got the main vocal here, and this is so it's the vocal with the effect applied.
Songs of old window remind us Calvert was sublime. And
so that's good. And then the other thing we've got is that echo effect, which I've got just at selected portions on the track. I've overlaid that. If I just play that in isolation, so you can see you can't quite make out the words. You've got that nice panning echo effect, and I've got that another couple of times. Over there. And if I play those two things together, you should hear the combined effect.
and just the words we say.
So if I play that without the echo effect, and then I add it, it's very dry and truncated. If I add the effect in, so that's pretty good. Something else I'll show you, just as we've got this the ability to mix all of the tracks here. If I go back to the start and set that going, oh, that's not the start. That's the start. Oops, it's all. So we can bring up, let's say, the drum track. That's the bass. Lead. And that's good. You can do that, you know, and get your mix set up how you want it. But you can do that live as you go as well, while you're recording, as a sort of performance element to that. But there is a facility to automate that. If we go to this track in particular and click automation, we can see the volume has an automation track. Now there's two ways you can do this. I'm only going to show you one. You can see we've got an envelope there. These plus signs define an envelope, and it basically fades from 0 in to sort of nominal volume and then out again on the overlay effect. And you'll see if I go to the other effect, the other vocal track at the same point, that actually fades out. I mean, the volume difference doesn't look a lot there. The vertical scales, it's not very well defined, but you can see that when that effect fades in, the main track fades out. If I just try to demonstrate that. Well, you can't really hear much of a difference there, but that's the intention. It fades out and the overlay effect fades in. That one should be more obvious. You can hear it fade in, nominal volume. And if you look at this slider over on the right, that's reflecting the position of the slider basically in the mixer. And if you were to look at that in the mixer, the one that's highlighted is the overlay effect. It's at 0 there. If you watch the slider, it pushes it up and then down, and you'll see the slider next to it. If I just play that again, you watch the slider next to it to the left, that starts off high and it dips slightly. Now that animation is just an effect, that's not really adding anything to the plot, but it illustrates what's going on here. So it allows you to quite subtly blend two different tracks or more. I've stuck with two for the vocal track. So that's getting close to the end. The only other, I've got another vocal track at the bottom here. This is the master vocal track. This is the unadulterated Quindorimi. That's enough of that. Vocal track, just because in case I hadn't finished playing with it, but for now we don't need that at all. It's just leave that switched off. So the only other things I've done are I've worked on the. So the only other thing of consequence I've done is I've worked a bit on that solo, and I've actually added. Let's just change the order of these. That's the lead guitar. I've added two extra lead guitar tracks. Again, they're just overlays to that specific portion around the solo. If I just move these up so they're below the main lead guitar, if I click and hold on that and just drag it up, and then the next one, click and hold and drag that up, I've got two extra tracks here, and you'll notice if you've got a keen eye that I've used a different synth for these. The lead guitar, if we just go in there and listen to that, it's not terribly convincing with that cauldron preset. It's not bad. It doesn't really stand out. So I've gone in and I've chosen to use Xeon to do that, and a preset I've chosen called Lead 1 and from the Xeon library, and that's kind of a nice leady sound, and it's got that nice portamento effect, which means the notes will effectively, it's like a slide, the notes blur into each other, which is kind of like a lead guitar sound. And if we just play that through on its own, because this solo originated, somebody did a performance and captured it as MIDI. I think you'll see as well I've taken that up an octave again from the original. So that's the same octave as the actual lead. If I play the two together, oops, didn't mean to do that. If I play the two together, the main lead and that overlay, still sounds pretty thick already. But if I take that Xeon track back up an octave, you should see it sounds a bit better. So it gives it that top end, sort of shrieking guitar kind of sound. And I could have done other things there. I could have added some distortion and all sorts of things, but you can get carried away. If I put that in with the grunge guitar as well, we should hear. So look at that. And the second effect I've done for the lead is, if I turn off the other two, use another Xeon effect just for the start of this guitar solo. I've put in this kind of bleepy, it's like more of an effect really than a musical. It's like an arpeggioed. It's kind of R2D2 singing along. So I've done that. I've put that in. If I play that over the two leads together, I'm really not hearing that actually. If I just turn off the grunge guitar, done with that. And we'll turn off the second. So we've got the main lead piece and that bleepy overlay. If I put in the second lead, and then again I've got an automation track on there just to start that off a little bit louder and then fade it down as we go. And that's it. If I just play everything going into that solo, oh sorry, I've just turned everything off instead of on. And we're done pretty much. The only thing to say is this song ended very abruptly, and I think in actual recordings of Overkill it just fades out. So I just sort of copped out really, and imagined this was a rehearsal performance, and it just kind of breaks off with a couple of effects. So the lead just stops. Miscellaneous things there. So there it is. That's my first experiment with Cubasis. I'm sure there's many things I've done here which there are much more efficient ways or more creative ways indeed of doing them. I'm happy to hear comments from people on those kind of ideas, but for now I think that'll do. See you next time.